on the hunt for varroa mite at Tocal in the Hunter region of New South Wales. It's about 50 kilometres from where the deadly pest was first detected a month ago. Peter O'Shannessy leads one of 14 teams searching for the insect which could devastate Australia's honeybee industry. He's an invasive species expert and an amateur beekeeper.
We've been waiting with bated breath, I suppose, hoping that it didn't come, but now it's come. We've got to do what we can to try and halt it where it is.
These hives are among the many thousands which have been painstakingly inspected and tested so far. Infected hives from dozens of properties have now been destroyed. Varroa mite was first detected in sentinel hives at the port of Newcastle, but authorities now believe ground zero was at Williamtown, further north.
What we believe the scenario is at this point in time is a much higher level of infestation around the Williamtown part of Newcastle as opposed to around the actual port.
So Williamtown, is it likely then that it's come from the airbase there?
All possible options are on the table. It's not to say that it hasn't come out of the airbase. There's also a theory about COVID-19 and how that affected international shipping and large numbers of coal ships and container ships sitting off the port that wouldn't normally be there for prolonged periods of time. And so we're sort of looking at all of those options to see, what's the most, I suppose, scientifically justified explanation for how those bees got into that area.
Chris Anderson heads an emergency response which swung into operation within 24 hours of the detection. Up to 500 people from across industry and government agencies have worked to contain the spread and eliminate the pest.
So that gives you an update on assessments every day?
Yeah, but the buck stops with New South Wales Agriculture Minister Dugald Saunders.
We're doing everything we can to lock it down and manage it, and we need to keep doing that as much as we can, but also plan for what it looks like if things do continue into the future.
One of those decisions may be to consider new technology, such as the Purple Hive, an early warning system which has been trialled in the Port of Melbourne. It features cameras and artificial intelligence to provide real-time reporting of bee health, including if they bring pests into their hives. Its inventors believe the current manually inspected sentinel hives are no longer fit for purpose.
Our technology doesn't look at one bee once. It looks from top, it looks from bottom. It does it 10 times as the bee's going in and out of the hive, getting multiple angles, multiple detections. The technology is known, it's been proven, it's ready, and we're on standby to help.
That's the way of the future, absolutely, but having hives that literally attract bees to be there is still a really significant interaction, and human interaction with that is also really still important. So I think there's a place for both.
For now, the priority is containing any spread of varroa, and while that appears to be working, the honeybee industry believes it's only a matter of time before Australia has to live with varroa destructor.
We've always been told that it's not a case of if, but when varroa mite comes here, and we've had incursions in the past, and we've been very lucky to be able to eradicate them in the past. So, yes, if we are able to eradicate this incursion, there's no doubt there'll be another one.
This is how we usually use what we call alcohol shakes.
Beekeepers outside of the emergency zone in New South Wales are now checking their hives in readiness for the pollination season. Charlie Casido has tested 5,000 hives to gain travel permits to move them to help pollinate Australia's billion-dollar almond crop later this month.
This is a big relief, and then at least we have this done, and then we can see that negative result.
It's a big relief for Sam Lockwood too. His family sells about 750,000 kilograms of honey every year, but pollination is crucial to their business, and they normally move their 10,000 hives around the state pollinating a range of food crops until autumn.
It's our biggest income for the year. It's what we pay all our wages from, leases, all our trucks. It's the start of the season. It's the big setup cost, pays all the bills for the year ahead, yeah.
Honeybees help pollinate about $6 billion worth of food crops in Australia every year, but they're not the only insects that can do the job. Australia has about 1,650 native bee species that have been named by scientists.
And that's all a lot of those bees have, just a name. As far as where they nest, where they occur, what plant species they might visit for food, their natural enemies. For most species of native bees, none of that information is known.
Tim Hurd is a former CSIRO entomologist. He's on the executive of the Australian Native Bee Association, which is encouraging farmers to consider how best to augment their crop pollination with native bees. Australian stingless bees are already pollinating high-value crops like macadamias, avocados, blueberries and mangoes, but they're limited to warmer climates and are no alternative to honeybees for big crops like almonds, which flower when it's too cold for stingless bees and are grown with limited natural habitat nearby.
There's been quite a lot of work done in the last 5 years documenting what native bees are pollinating crops, which of those bees are the most efficient, and whether you can improve populations, boost populations of those native bees, the ones that are most efficient and that are visiting the crop, and by means such as providing homes for those bees, providing alternative food sources when the crop is not flowering, protecting natural bushland in that environment. There are ways that you can manage populations of native bees, and quite a lot of research is being done to do that better.
He says the impact of varroa mite on honeybees would bring risks and opportunities for native bees. A likely devastating decline in feral honeybee numbers would mean reduced competition in the wild. But varroa mite could indirectly impact natives because it could introduce new viral diseases.
Wherever varroa mite gets introduced, honeybees show much higher levels of viral load. They have much more virus in them, and they suffer the consequences of those viruses. Those honeybees are foraging on the same plant species that our native bees are. They leave viral particles on the flowers of those species. Native bees visit those flowers, they pick up those viruses through ingesting the resources on those flowers, the nectar and the pollen, and then they can suffer from some of those diseases.
Flies, and in particular blowflies, could become important commercial pollinators if honeybee populations are hit by the varroa mite.
A lot of flies, and blowflies in particular, have a very big demand for sugar, which they get through the nectar in flowers. So flowers are just an advertisement for the plant to invite an insect to come along and feed on it. And because they're very big and they're very hairy, they've got hairs all over their body, they pick up pollen accidentally and move it to the next flower.
David Cook heads a national Hort Innovation funded 5-year study into flies as pollinators. In WA, the common blue-bodied blowfly is already proving it can do the job on crops like blueberries.
We can literally almost double the total yield of berries from the plant, and we actually have bigger berries on them as well. You know, there's no end of flies that we could kind of look at, but we have to be smart and look at the flies that we know come to the flowers of that crop. And secondly, they've got the ability to transfer enough pollen each time they visit.
Key to the research now will be to see what flies can be bred in the sort of numbers needed for commercial pollination.
It's easy to rear blowflies. If you look at kind of the relative costs of rearing, say, 1 million blowflies versus getting enough bees, 1 million bees in hives, the cost is about 1/3 in terms of your inputs. So they certainly stack up in terms of the economics as being an option if need be.
And while blowflies are often associated with germs, there would be no health risk to using them as pollinators.
If they do need to reproduce and lay eggs or larvae, they'll go off somewhere else and lay it on a dead body. The biosecurity risk in terms of spreading a pathogen or disease is not really there. You know, that perception of flies as just being disease-carrying organisms is not necessarily the only side to flies. You know, there is a good side to them, and one of them is their ability to pollinate so many crops, whether they be introduced commercial crops or our native flowering species.
Ultimately, honeybees will still be Australia's main pollinators, even if varroa mite becomes endemic. This would reduce hive numbers by up to 30% at a time when the industry is still rebuilding from the impacts of drought, bushfires and floods.
We're already stretched as an industry for pollination services, so industry is going to have to really step up and start breeding new hives, and that's really part of managing varroa, is learning how to increase hive numbers a lot more readily than we do now. We know that pollination industries can also rely on other insects for pollination, but where it's really going to impact the pollination industries is that lack of feral bee colonies once and if it's spread across the country.
Charlie Casido says not being able to move his bees for a month has already impacted on the queen bee breeding part of his business.
Well, so far the queen bee breeding, I think I can say 50% loss already. Not only the market, the production itself, just because we are very delayed on our starting on the queen bee breeding program.
Charlie was a beekeeper in his native Philippines and in Saudi Arabia, where the varroa mite was established. He's confident Australia's beekeeping industry can manage the pest.
They have the right management as well over there, so I think we can apply here.
It'll mean more labour-intensive inspections and introducing pesticides as an ongoing management tool.